I think it depends on what you're looking for and what you're doing. For me, the key was that my mom had left Puerto Rico and eventually settled in Chicago, even though she went back for a bit. But she lived most of her adult life and still lives in Chicago. So it was kind of hard for her to judge if I were to leave because she left her family, right? So it's kind of like a smoker telling someone not to smoke, right? In my case, it was really essential for me to leave on my own, to sort of be my own person because, you're so close to your family and they are helpful and they're loving and they're supportive, and that gets you through really tough times.
Pull up a chair because if you want to grow your career intentional, today conversation is going to be amazing. So, Diana Bernal, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm glad to be here.
I am ready to have this conversation with you on how to grow career intentionally, especially for my high achieving Latinas that are always thinking about the next step. But before we do that, I would like to ask you a little bit about yourself. What was your relationship with money growing up? So give us a little bit of the behind the scenes of who you are and where you come from.
Yes, and I think my story can best be told in a before and after because I grew up in Chicago, which is a very important part of me, even though I live in Los Angeles. But I love the city of Chicago. And when I was very young, we had a pretty nice life. It was me and my brother, my mom and my dad. Dad worked, he was a truck driver, so it was a blue collar household, but mom didn't have to work. This was in the era where a blue collar job could sustain a family of four. And we had a 2-story house and everything was pretty okay. And then one night, my parents had a lot of friends over all the time, very social. And they would always have people over to play cards or have drinks, Cuba Libre. And I walked into the dining room one day and I said, Dad, why is mom crying? And he rushes over. And sure enough, the phone had rung and her father had died. And her family is born and raised in Puerto Rico. Everyone was in Puerto Rico. So that was a pivotal moment for us because they went out for the funeral and Abuela, her mom, had to figure out what to do with the family farm that her son was managing. There were 3 adult daughters and an adult son. And so the grandfather had just died. And Abuela said, well, I'm just going to give the farm to my son and not really think about the 3 daughters she had. And you've got to understand, this is Latino culture. This was of that era. Like, why would the girls need anything? All of her girls were married with children. So the assumption was that the man would take care of these women, right? Well, sure enough, we had an uncle who said to Abuela, it was her younger brother, said, maybe you should give the girls just a little something that they could have. So each of the adult women got 5 acres, which is just enough to build a little house and maybe to grow a little bit of, coffee and beans in the backyard. And that was pivotal. That was pivotal because each of those 2 women living in Puerto Rico got divorced. And sure enough, what did they have? They had a house, they had their own property, because we know that single women are more likely to suffer in poverty and become bankrupt. So it is really important for women to think about that. So this was more of a lifeline than anyone imagined at the time. Now, my parents are still married. They weren't in Puerto Rico, but they had that land and they had to figure out what they were going to do with it. And sure enough, they decided, well, let's move to Puerto Rico. Let's build a house and live there. And, at 10 years old, that sounds kind of like Fantasy Island. It sounds kind of fun, going to the beach. But, we lived in the mountains. We weren't on the beach, right? And it was hard. It was really hard and they struggled and income was sporadic and that created problems. And so one other pivotal thing happened was down the road, the first girl in town at 16 became pregnant. And that was a big deal. And I think my parents were like, you know what? We're packing up. We're going, we're going back to Chicago. And they kind of had to start over. So that's my before and after story because I saw sort of a basic life where Christmas was nice and the holidays were nice. And we didn't take big, extravagant vacations, but we would maybe drive up to Wisconsin or do something simple. And now they had to struggle. They had to start over. They were in an apartment. My mom had to go back to work. So when you ask my relationship with money, it is really tough because I saw when you have money and when you don't. And that stuck with me. And it became a part of who I was, that I was always going to work. And I started working at 16 in an office. And the first break I had was when I got pregnant and delivered my child 20 years later.
Oh my goodness. Now, thank you for sharing that. I just love the vivid picture that you painted for us and also for the audience. It's so interesting how the Latino culture always goes el hombre es el que tiene el dinero, right?
Right.
Now, I have been following your journey on LinkedIn, specifically in terms of like the work that you do as a leadership coach and speaker, and now an author as well. So, I want to talk a little bit about the work that you do and why did you decided to become part of this ecosystem of Latinas that are helping other Latinas, specifically through leadership development?
Because I didn't have a roadmap. You know, I went to college and I was first gen to go to college. My dad didn't finish high school. I didn't know what to do, what to wear. And I almost didn't finish college, actually. I was really lucky that I was working for a big company part time. And junior year, I kind of ran out of money. You know, all the savings that I had from working since I was 16 got me through the first 2 years. And I had to go to my boss and say, hey, I was thinking, can I work full time and finish college at night? And she said yes on the spot. So again, that was a pivotal moment for me. You know, you have these gifts in life that you don't really realize until many years later what a gift that job and those people were. So I wished I would have known so much more about how to enter the workforce, how to carry yourself, how to look for other jobs. And I, at that time in my young 20s, went to a career coaching workshop. It was a weekend. It was Friday, Saturday, and a little bit of Sunday. And I realized, wow, my career doesn't have to be so attached to my degree. My career can use my skills and my interests and those unique things that make me special, you know, because I have this big personality and I had this energy that probably wasn't well suited for a stuffy bank in downtown Chicago. So that's when I made my first pivot from being in corporate financial services to fundraising. And I excelled. I did great. I did so well that in the first 9 months of working in Chicago, the chapter in Los Angeles heard about me and they called me. And that's what brought me out to Los Angeles. And so I tell people that if you are in the right fit, your reputation is known. People will seek you out. And that's what happened to me. So I guess I became so evangelical because not only did I find a career that I was well suited for, but it paid me well and it let me live a really interesting life and travel and do all those things. But I knew a lot of other young Latinas didn't have that roadmap, didn't have that understanding that they could make these choices. You know, a lot of Latina moms will tell you to become a teacher, a nurse. My mom told me to be a flight attendant or work in a bank, be a bank teller, you know, because those were the professional jobs that she saw. And I just wanted to help the women who out there who I knew were looking for guidance or just looking for a different way to think about things and think about their career. And so that's when I made my second career pivot to go into coaching.
I love it. Now, you talk about how you want people to be prepared for the right fit. How does that look like? Because when you were saying the word, I was like, well, it could mean different things for different people depending on the industry. So, what were some of the things that help you open those doors for yourself that maybe some of my listeners can reflect on? Oh, this is an actionable step that I can take today.
Yeah, I talk about three things, a combination of three things in the book: skills, interests, and place. So the skills aren't just like you can manage a spreadsheet, but you know, that I had a lot of energy, that I was really a good communicator, that I wanted to use my ability to influence and communicate well. So you have to look at the skills that come easy to you and that you enjoy using. And then you have to look at your interests. I was at a place where I wanted to do something more meaningful. I didn't care about corporate financial services. Sorry, guys. I didn't want to sell computers. I didn't want to sell cars. I didn't want to sell any stuff, but I wanted to be at a mission based organization. So that was my interest. And then place. I think we don't think about place enough because if we are lucky enough to go to college, we get recruited and we go where the new company tells us to go. Oh, we're going to assign you to Atlanta. Or we're going to put you in the headquarters in Chicago. We really have to think about the place in which we thrive. Because if I'm doing work in Chicago, San Francisco, New York, LA, I'm thriving because those are my favorite cities. Some people like to be closer to home. They like a small office, and that's fair too. So if you think of the combination of those things, then that's a place where you will excel. And then again, that's how you continue to be successful because you're in the right place for you.
Love this. Now, a lot of the listeners are probably thinking, like, oh my God, going to another city is such a barrier for a lot of Latinas because we grew up hearing that we have to be close to home. In your opinion, do you believe that leaving the place where you grew up is actually an advantage for Latinas that want to seek higher leadership positions in corporate America?
I think it depends on what you're looking for and what you're doing. For me, the key was that my mom had left Puerto Rico and eventually settled in Chicago, even though she went back for a bit. But she lived most of her adult life and still lives in Chicago. So it was kind of hard for her to judge if I were to leave because she left her family, right? So it's kind of like a smoker telling someone not to smoke, right? In my case, it was really essential for me to leave on my own, to sort of be my own person because, you're so close to your family and they are helpful and they're loving and they're supportive and that gets you through really tough times. But then you're also just sort of with the same friend group. And, sometimes our high school and our college friends just sort of stay with us and they maybe aren't the right people for us anymore. So if you make a big leap to go to a different city, then you get to establish the friend groups that you want, the things that you want to do. Now, I moved from Chicago to Los Angeles with a job. I had a job offer and I had some contacts there. They were going to help me set me up and a place to stay. And, I was making enough money that I could rent an apartment on my own. So I would definitely encourage people if they want to move to a different city, make sure that there's a job or something else connected to it. But for me, it was certainly a way to break out. And if you have a tough time, if your family is close by and you're the first one to leave, you might want to say, well, I'm just going to do this for 2 years. I'm just going to do this and then I'll come back. And some people come back and some don't. And that was me. I was supposed to come back after 2 years. And then I met my husband and one thing led to another. And it's been over 20 years that I've been in Los Angeles.
And I love that. Now, a while ago, since you mentioned your husband, a while ago, I made a post on LinkedIn specifically on how one of the biggest investments that you make in your career, in your life, is actually deciding who you marry. Whether
Mm,
we like it or not, you mentioned that you are the chief financial officer of your house,
yes.
which means that you manage essentially the money and you have the money conversation. So could you walk us through how does that look like for you in your relationship? Just
Mhm.
so the listeners can have almost like a day in a life of how you deal with this conversation related to money.
Yeah. So when I was in my 30s and I was starting to do pretty well, and I was surrounded by other vice presidents or females that were real leaders, we would have real honest conversations. And more than one woman said to me, look, find a guy who is kind and makes you laugh, but be responsible for your own money. Make your own money. So that stuck with me. And then certainly seeing the struggles that my parents went through, I'm like, no, 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 I'm not going through that. So when we met, we were both on equal footing. He was actually self-employed in the entertainment industry and I was working in nonprofit, but even though a lot of nonprofit jobs don't pay well, when you are a fundraiser, those jobs do pay well. So we were sort of on equal footing, but then he switched careers and then I started to increase up the ladder. Again, if you are in the right fit, doing the right thing, you are known and you're rewarded. So, I broke my first 6-figure mark and then I broke the second 6-figure mark. And for us, it was not a big deal because I didn't use the money as leverage or power. Now, because I'm the family CFO, I have an understanding of the money. So when we want to take a vacation, when we want to plan our retirement, I certainly help drive that conversation. But these are certainly joint conversations that we have. And so for us, it works because I am financially savvy. I love a good spreadsheet. I love looking at the retirement accounts and doing the projections and all that. He could care less. He bakes bread. He cooks dinner. He is domestic because he had 6 sisters. Okay. And he had some really wonderful older sisters too that sort of, they took him under their wing because he was the only boy. But he's just that more domestic person. So it was a great combination that I loved doing the business side and he loved doing the domestic stuff.
I love that. And I wanted to ask you specifically about that because I think that we need to just normalize this conversation on how
Yes.
Latinas can really own their financial future, but also the conversations that we need to have with our partner, like the healthy conversations, of course. And I wanted to ask you, when you were mentioning how you structure your book, I noticed you didn't mention money. Is that something that you talk about on the book, or is that not part of your
Talk
framework?
about negotiating salary for sure, because that's a big part of it. And I talk about building a financial cushion, especially if you are building a side hustle. And look, money is important. I'm not going to deny that money makes the world go round. And the more money you have, the more options you have. But when I think about the career connection and the right fit, there's got to be more than money driving it because money will only get you so far. Now, there are a sliver of people. We know who they are. We see the yachts. We see them on TV all the time. For them, money is the only thing. That's not me. And it's probably not a lot of Latinas. But I think you're
Yes.
right that we need to start talking more about women being rich Latinas owning their presence, and some of us making more money than our husbands because a lot of them are kind of quiet about it. They don't say anything. And it's not like we just like open with, oh, I make more money. But, you can kind of tell the people who want to talk about it. And so my clients eventually, after our second or third meeting, they start to open up about those things. So I think the more all women talk about money and how it is part of our relationship and we use it for different things, money is a tool. That's all it should be. It's a tool to get you what you need.
Yes, 100%. And thank you for mentioning that you do teach people how to negotiate their salary. I'm curious to know what are some of the commonalities that you see when you're having that conversation with your clients? Like, are there any patterns that you see women maybe hesitant to
Mm.
establish or even initiate the conversation regarding how to make more money that you can share with us?
Yes, because a lot of my clients are in their mid 40s, maybe they're 50 something, and they've been at a place for a long time, or they've been at a certain place in their career where they make a certain amount of money, and it's kind of hard to give that up. Or maybe they are the primary breadwinner and they know that if they make a change, that's going to have a ripple effect. So they raise it. And so we just talk about it like, how can you and your partner really look at your finances and say, what is helpful for us? What do we have? What do we need? And together make that plan. Because if she's making a lot of money and she's unhappy, that's not helpful for anyone.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Now, Diana, I'm fascinated by this conversation with you already, and I want to now transition into your journey on
Mm.
becoming an author because I think that there isn't enough Latinas negotiating their salary. There isn't enough Latinas, having the financial wellness and the ability to create generational wealth, but also there is a gap with Latinas that are authors. What
Yes.
inspired you to write your book?
Well, other people told me to. So if you follow my suggestion of like looking at what other people suggest, what are other people commenting on? What are other people saying, oh, you should do that, you should do that? I was working with a lot of different clients, and anyone who follows me knows that I'm active with different community groups. So I will speak to Latinas in tech out here. I will speak to Lean and Latinas and a lot of other groups, and we'll talk about money, and they'll pull me aside and they'll say, this was so great. Can you put this down in a book? So I decided, you know what? I am going to do that. And I had been a publishing snob most of my life. I didn't think that self-publishing was very sophisticated or showed much, but there's a lot of work that goes into self-publishing and people are buying it. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to self-publish and I'm going to use this book as a marketing tool. And sure enough, here you and I are speaking, Lucy. I've got another podcast interview scheduled next week. I spoke to Janice Torres on Yo Quiero Dinero. So it is a tool for me to get the word out and really to put it in the hands of people, that to get them thinking about their career and to get them thinking about what's right for them at any given moment.
Yes, 100%. And the more, I don't know how you grew up, but like I grew up reading a lot of books that did not represent my culture, definitely not even my language, my first language. And so it wasn't until I want to say 2018 that I started to intentionally invest in buying books from Latina authors. And that changed my perspective on not just money but also access, right? A lot of us have access to information that continues to just make us feel like we have to look a certain way to be
Hmm.
successful. And
Hmm.
personally, when I started reading Latina authors, I started realizing that we can just be our authentic selves. And what a gift to also support and redirect dollars back to a Latina by investing in her book. So tell me a little bit about when did you publish your book and where can people find it?
Thank you. The book is on Amazon. It is Career with Intention. And if you want, I can give a little peek right here. The process had been about 2 years in the making, but I really hunkered down and I set a date because there was a conference that I was speaking at in April. And I talked to the conference leader and she said, I want you to speak. And I said, oh, I could give away my book. She said, no, no, Diana, you come and you sell your book. And I was like, okay, see, again, I had to adjust my thinking. So I just got to it and I did it in a way that was what I wanted people to have because it first started out as a journal and there are journal pages in it, but it's more than that now. It's a guide and it is a place for you to jot down those notes while you're thinking of it. But it's true that a lot of authors, if I look at my bookshelf over there with Brene Brown and Marshall Goldsmith, a lot of them don't come from the same humble beginnings perhaps that we have. So I think that connection when I talk to people and even when I look at other people, I'm like, from the get-go, you understand me and I understand you. Like you might be a rich Latina and your parents were doctors, or you might have come from a barrio and you didn't have anything, but somehow we have a common understanding. And I think anytime we can get our groups together to share our expertise and support one another, then we're just boosting it. And when it comes to authors, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I was just at the LA Times Festival of Books in April, and we talked about this with Gloria Calderon Kellett, who's a terrific director. She did the reboot of One Day at a Time, and we talked about getting Latino voices out there. We have to buy the books. We have to go see the movies. We can even take them out at the library. One of the authors was saying, look, if you check out that book at the library, that shows the demand. So we have to support any and all Latino content creators, authors, movie producers. That way, the rest of the industry catches up to us.
Yes, 100%. And I love that this event host told you have to come and sell your book because there's so much work that goes unseen when you become an author. Like, personally for me, I have to pause my group programs that I had so I could write the book. And I'm glad that I did because I grew with the book. I had the opportunity to just really put myself in the author mindset and action. Like I have to produce the book, I have to launch the book, and now I'm excited to, birth this new book to the world. Which I hope it's not my only one because I
Yeah,
do
for
enjoy
sure.
doing these.
And that's what I'm already thinking. I mean, I pushed to get this book out for that conference, and I'm glad I had that date. And I had a designer work with me to develop the color because it's so pretty. It's so nice. The cover has to grab people, right? It has to stop the scroll when they're on Amazon. But I'm already thinking of volume 2. But it was important that I just get something out there. And so when I have time or when I try and figure out what volume 2 is going to be, I can expand. I can include more stories, more of my own experiences that got me to where I am. So yeah, I think getting one out there is a nice experience. And then when you see the reviews on Amazon, I'm like, oh my God, people are reading this. People like this. That's
Yes,
kind of nice.
I love that. Now, Diana, what is your definition of wealth today?
That's a great question because I think a lot of people might attach a dollar to it. And on paper, my husband and I might be in the top, 5% of families. But don't forget, we live in Los Angeles. We're housing a starter home is $1 million out here in Los Angeles. And we have 2 kids in college. But wealth to me means having options. It means having options. So, for instance, we went on vacation to Spain after Christmas. So, that was an option. We could decide where we wanted to go. We went to Europe. We could decide how long we were going to stay and what hotels we were going to stay at. Whereas, my family growing up didn't have a lot of options. This is what we had to do. We had no other choice. We couldn't afford to fly on vacation. We could only drive up if we could take a vacation at all. So, for me, wealth really means having the options to do whatever it is that you want to do.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming to the show. But I also want you to tell us how can people work with you and where can they find you?
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, the first place to find me is dianainc.com. It's a very simple website, dianainc.com. And I'm on LinkedIn a lot. And I do a couple of things. As I mentioned, I do public speaking and I talk to women about making more money or finding the courage to move forward in their actions, whatever that is, and a lot of career success strategies. So I do one-on-one coaching, sort of executive coaching, for instance, for women who perhaps just got promoted or they're in a big assignment and their company wants to invest in them and give them the support they need. So the coaching, the book is out there, Career with Intention. You can find it on Amazon or the speaking. But again, you can follow me on LinkedIn. You can check out my website and always send me an email. I always respond to my emails. So if anyone wants to chat, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Diana, and keep doing what you're doing because I just love watching you really fully take space to help more Latinas. We met through Latinas in Tech, which is an organization that I volunteer for, and I just love how events like the Latinas in Tech Summit can also help us come closer to connecting with other people. So thank you for coming to the show. I wish you more success than the one you already have. And let's go ahead and build our Cash Libre juntas.
Thank you. And thank you. And good luck to you, Lucy. And congratulations on the amazing work that you have done for our community as well.
Thank you.